Christopher Wray is kind of in the hot seat right now.
Seeking to infiltrate Catholics with no links to violence raises troubling questions.
Federal government needs to be very careful, especially when it comes to religious groups and organizations.
Disturbing new revelations about the FBI targeting people of faith. The House Judiciary Committee says it's uncovered that multiple FBI field offices were involved in a now discredited effort to spy on conservative Catholics who were considered extremist. This contradicts FBI Director Christopher Wray, who testified that this was the work of one rogue field office and was immediately shut down. We're joined now by Charles Marino, a former advisor to the Department of Homeland Security. Charles, welcome to the show. Good to see you this evening.
You too, Lindsay.
Okay, from your perspective, is there a good explanation why the FBI was looking into Catholics as extremists in multiple field offices that we know now?
Well, there really isn't, and we can talk about what kind of approach this was, whether it was misguided or smart. I think it was rather misguided because, look, with an estimated 70 million Catholics in the United States, it really is unfair to target an entire group, even if you do have bad actors within this group. You know, we learned this after September 11th in terms of how we dealt from a law enforcement and intelligence standpoint with the Muslim community. And that is the federal government needs to be very careful, especially when it comes to religious groups and organizations in terms of categorizing the entire group one way or another.
So we heard from testimony from Director Wray that this was one rogue field office. That was a public hearing that we all heard for ourselves as well. So is it normal that the FBI director wouldn't be aware that this was at additional field offices, or did he not want the public to know that? Why would he not expose that, or would he not know? How abnormal is that?
Well, this puts Christopher Wray in a really bad position because, you know, he expressed or seemed to express some sort of outrage when this was brought up at his last congressional testimony when he thought it was limited to the Richmond field office. And now we find that other field offices like Portland and LA may have also been involved. So what this demonstrates or gives people the impression is that he has no control, no awareness of what's going on within his own agency. And that can concern Americans of saying, look, you know, if you don't know that they're doing this around the country, what else don't you know? And how else might the Bureau be violating civil liberties of individuals and religious groups?
Where do you think this direction is coming from the FBI? Is it within the FBI or is it higher? Is it higher in the DOJ?
You know, look, the DOJ is as the parent organization over the FBI. I hope that independence still remains to a great extent. I'm not that optimistic about that in terms of the role that the FBI is playing and DOJ's influence. The last thing you want to hear is about the politicization of the FBI. Look, we know there's political appointees in the Department of Justice, at DHS. That's just the nature of the beast. That's why we always say, you know, elections have consequences. But in this situation, the FBI really has got to remain an independent organization. And if they align themselves or feed into this political landscape that's going on here, they're never going to win.
We're joined now by former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, who's also the host of The Huckabee Show right here on TBN. Governor, welcome back to the show. Good to see you this Friday.
Thanks, Lindsay. Great to be with you. And I'd say Christopher Wray is kind of in the hot seat right now.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because one of two things are happening here. Either he wasn't honest with the American people in a committee hearing when he said he only knew about one field office, the Richmond field office, or he doesn't have control over what's happening at his own agency. Both things are bad, but what should happen to him? How should he or should he be held responsible?
Well, he's got to be held responsible because it's a pretty egregious issue. If he goes before Congress under oath and he says, oh, no, we didn't have a massive look at Catholics, we weren't trying to look into their faith and saying traditional Catholics are extremists, which is absurd on its face, either that's true or it's not true. He said it was true, that they weren't doing it, that there was one field office in Richmond, Virginia, that was the only one, limited to that. And then we find out, no, there were others. And so here's the point, and you made it perfectly. There's only one of two options. Either he lied, which is a terrible option for the FBI director, or the man is incompetent and he has no idea what's going on in his agency. And when he went to Congress and was asked that question, he was utterly unprepared, which means his staff did not prepare him adequately for the question, which he had to assume was coming. Neither option makes him look good. I think it's time for Chris Wray to say, I think I'll find something else to do. I'll go back into the corporate world and make millions of dollars, which is what he was doing before he became FBI director.
You know, we've often seen a lot of stories why it seems like the FBI has lost its way recently. Does this give us more insight into maybe why? Because you maybe have a director who isn't aware what's going on, or he's unwilling to be honest.
Well, we know he's had other instances where he wasn't honest. Last year, he was in a committee hearing before Congress, and he said he had a flight to catch. And it was like, oh, there's an airline leaving. It's Friday, and he's got to hurry and get to the airport. Turns out it was a private aircraft. It was going to take him for a vacation weekend. It wasn't like he had to go. He just wanted to go. And he pretended as if it was some commercial airliner that was on a schedule, and they were going to take off and leave him if he didn't get there. None of that was true. And he should have just said, look, I've got some plans for the weekend. I really like to go, want to see my family, and why don't you call me another time? That's not what he said. So this is not the first time Christopher Wray has kind of been caught, if not crossing the line of truth, certainly skating up next to it and sticking his toes right there on the border. You just can't have that in an FBI director. And you also have an FBI director who has held no one accountable, not one person accountable, for the lies that were told about Donald Trump, for the attempt to stage a coup d'etat against him from the time he was a candidate, what the Russia hoax and all the nonsense that they were telling, lying to get FISA documents and warrants so that they could spy on the sitting president of the United States. Nobody went to jail for that. In fact, people like Andrew McCabe and Peter Strzok, they got nice, lucrative television deals over at CNN and MSNBC. That's not accountability. And Christopher Wray is a part of that culture.
There's been a lot of concerning things happening at the FBI, but let me ask you this, because the FBI as a whole agency, they do amazing things as well for the American people. They protect us in many ways. We're seeing some of the bad things coming out. But how do congressional Republicans be careful to make sure they don't demonize the good people that are trying to protect the American people within the agency?
Lindsay, I think they have to continually remind people that out in the field offices that most of the agents are public servants who truly wanted to be in the FBI because they wanted to uphold law and order in the United States. They're good people. But there is something that's happened at the top of the agency, and it's vile, it's evil, and it's people who have decided to put themselves above the American public and, quite frankly, put themselves above the law. And that if we don't root those people out, expose them, and hold them accountable, then the credibility of the agency is destroyed, and it has no power to do the work that really we need done in the country.